All right, well, good afternoon. Welcome to this new edition of the Metaversial Minute. I'm here today with my good friend and colleague that I've worked with for the last, what is it now, David?
30 plus
years,
yeah
31 years.
yeah
So David Smith is the founder and CTO of Croquet. But he and I have, as you've seen in probably previous Metaversial Minutes, we worked together at I joined Virtus Corporation after David had started that company as the first. I was the first salesperson. We ended up forming a bunch of game companies together. I was on the management team with David when we created Red Storm Entertainment with Tom Clancy and Timeline with Michael Crichton, and did a game with Douglas Adams called Starship Titanic, and a game company with Ozzy Osbourne. And gosh, we had a lot of fun in the 90s, didn't we?
we did actually too much, I think, but we learned a lot too. I think that was an incredible time of experimenting and exploring idea spaces. So it was yeah, it was great fun.
It was
Yeah,
my little
there was
little street cred slide with all the stuff on it on one
yeah,
slide.
it was crazy.
All right, well, the metaverse is here, right? We were
Well,
talking
not
about
yet.
that back in the 90s. Well, it seems imminent, and
Imminent's great. I would say there's a lot there's a lot of misunderstanding of what it even is, but it's actually pretty clear that there's significant interest in it. And we're going to see significant investment in it, which is really, it's ripe for that. But to say it's not here, I mean, it's like not the real one that we've talked about for decades, but you can taste it in the air.
Yeah, so years ago, just for you in the audience, Dave, this is the box version of it, but David and I did this book. Here's a picture of the book on the back. I was just talking to Shell Israel today about when we did this in 1995. Cy Marin, the product guy, sort of marketing guy at Comdex, came out and said we were brilliant because we had a book, and we put the book in a box with a CD and sold it. So we got computer game distribution, store distribution, as well as bookstore distribution. But we were talking about the imminent need for a 3D internet way back then. And that was only a few years after the birth of the 2D graphical internet. And here we are. So what's new about now, and why do you feel that, as we all do, I think that Croquet is really poised to be one of the beacons in this discussion about the metaverse?
Why now is I think there's a lot of contributing factors today that simply weren't, around at the time of when we first did our website builder applications. The first is that we're getting interesting AR and VR platforms. I think that was a necessary part of this kind of visibility of the metaverse. People are seeing that, hey, not only is the internet there, which it's been for a while, but we actually have deployment vehicles for a lot of this stuff that really plot the way to the future. The devices aren't that good yet, relatively speaking, but they're demonstrating that we're on a path towards that. I might add, by the way, the reason we got to here with the head mount devices we're seeing really came down to Mark Bolus, who was a professor at USC, saw that the cell phones, smartphone screens were ideal for a head mount display. So he actually made a prototype that illustrated that. Palmer Luckey was working for him and actually took that idea, and that's where Oculus came from. But it was Mark Bolus who had the very important insight that, hey, it's the hardware is here. But so I think that was what fueled the original interest. I mean, obviously, Facebook bought Oculus, and then Zuckerberg got so obsessed with this, he basically he's changing the direction of his entire company around that. And I think that was really, it's one of those pivotal things. We may disagree with a lot of what he's doing, but it takes a lot of courage to transform an organization like that into something that is potentially either going to be leading us to this next generation or crashing on the rocks, which I'm hoping not.
Well,
But
it did
yeah, that's
cause
how it
everybody
happened.
to pay attention, right? All of a sudden, everyone paid attention to it when they really
Yeah,
weren't before.
that's right. It wasn't it was a non-existent market, and now we've got you know, everybody's saying, oh, it's like $20 trillion in 10 years. And, well, that might be true. I hope it is. I think it's going to be significant. But, that of course led to directly, what is this thing? The metaverse, and we think about where it was originally coined was Neil Stephenson's book, Snow Crash. And he talked about the metaverse really as a sort of a dystopian kind of world where people could engage with each other. A lot of it was to escape the real world, but it was a very compelling vision for a lot of us, as you recall. And so I think that's not a terrible starting point. It's not a terrible word to describe it. I think of it, I tend to capitalize it, metaverse. Most people don't, but I think of it in the same way as internet is capitalized, and so I think it's a significant extension of the internet. And I think it's really important to talk about Tony Parisi, who pointed out that the metaverse really is the internet with some dressed up a bit. And I think that's actually accurate.
Well, and you've done a lot of collaborating with Alan Kay, and when we talked to Alan about this idea of going from a paper-based 2D interface for the internet and for many of our applications to 3D, he said, "Hey, we were doing that in the 1960s, and why is it taking so long to get there? Why has it taken us so long to get?" We use 3D for entertainment, for design, and for simulation learning, but why haven't we used it for more interface applications?
There's a really good reason. I mean, first of all, let's remember that what we're talking about is a social platform versus, kind of when we do games, typically it's a single user game, or when it's multiplayer, I think in terms of the vocabulary of the game, right? Almost every game, the vocabulary is you can move, you can shoot, and you can kill or you can die, depending how good you are. That's the entire set of kind of words in these
There's
worlds.
also gathering, yeah, crafting and gathering.
Exact crafting and gathering. But the but the main thing is that we didn't have an ability to interact with this world and each other in the same way we could interact with a computer. And so because of that limited vocabulary, it's like it's very limited what was possible. We have to go back in time really to understand what true collaborative systems really are. And that all roads lead back to Doug Engelbart, who really thought of computing, the computer itself, as sort of an interface between humans to kind of solve problems. It's a communication, collaboration, thinking system.
The augmented human, yeah.
That's right. And then Alan took that ball and took a next step where he came up with this idea that he called a Dynabook. A Dynabook was basically a tablet-sized device. And, we think of an iPad today, it's almost exactly the same size, same weight. But there was a big difference between them, which is that Alan wrote a paper in 1972 called The Personal Computer for Children of All Ages, where he described the Dynabook. And he starts with a story of two children who are playing a game together, Space War actually. And then they say, oh, this isn't that much fun, let's make it more complicated. And they both switch into programming that game, modifying the code together collaboratively. Then they switch back and they play the game again. And what that whole process said, hey, that the computer again is a way for them to engage, to collaborate, to explore and extend. And that was the big vision that came out of the 60s. And then, as you know, the Dynabook launched the Xerox Alto. They referred to the Xerox Alto as the interim Dynabook. And by the way, that's the system that Steve Jobs saw, and Bill Gates a little later, and said, holy shit, this changes everything. This is the future of computing. And Steve Jobs even said that in 10 minutes, he knew every computer is going to work this way. And in fact, it does, except that they don't have collaboration. They don't have that ability to engage. And so we're now on the threshold of this next generation. And we talk about what the metaverse is. Again, it's not just about, hey, I'm going to go around and talk to you like I'm in Zoom. That's certainly a piece of it, but that's not the thing. That's the, kind of a necessary feature. What it is exactly what Doug Engelbart said, which is it's a communication, collaboration, creation platform where if I have an idea, I can share it with you as easily as you and I are discussing this right now. I mean, I just say the word, we have computer AIs that generate that, a version of that object. You're able to interact with it, move it around, explore it, break it apart, modify the program, whatever you need to do, but you're doing it collaboratively. Everything that you can do on a single user system now all of a sudden blossoms into part of a conversational system where you and I are engaging dynamically. So really, the metaverse,
almost like the holodeck event eventually.
in a sense, I think that's a better model. And so in a real way, the metaverse is a communication platform. It is extending the way we engage with each other. And really important to understand that you're defined more by how you communicate than anything. Languages extend you in powerful ways. A good example, music is a kind of language. We don't usually think of it that way, but in fact, you're communicating ideas with other people, and you're playing jazz together. You're building up something much greater than the sum of the parts. Mathematics is another language that allows us to, with great formalism and power, explore the universe. Well, what we're talking about is yet another kind of language that allows you and me to engage. I'll say something, it exists, you expand on it. And what's really amazing to me is what we're doing is we're amplifying the capabilities of humans. We're amplifying the way they think and what they can do. And it comes down to this: you are defined more by how you communicate than anything. That's how you think. Language is like a virtual machine running in your head.
Yeah, what did Engelbert say? It was like our language, our tools, and our artifacts, or was it models? Language, tools, artifacts, right?
Yeah, and so yeah, exactly. And so if you're defined by how you communicate, what we're doing now, especially with the power that this metaverse thing is going to exhibit, we're changing what it means to be human. We're really reinventing what humans are. And that's going to happen over the next 10, 20, 30 years. We won't recognize the humans of the future, because they're going to be living and thinking on a plane that we're not going to have access to for some time. But we're going to help birth that, which is really exciting.
Yeah, I think you've said a couple of things there that have me thinking about one of the reasons I believe strongly in what you're doing with croquet is, and of course, I am somewhat of a disciple of all the stuff you've taught me over the years, but it's this idea that, we've got to remove all the friction. I was just telling someone the other day, is like, why did Zynga go from $0 to $7 billion in however many years? It wasn't because they created amazing games that were better than any other games. They in many cases, it looked like copies of games that were already out there. They just made sure that when you pinged a bunch of people on Facebook and finally convinced your aunt or your uncle or your grandmother to play the game with you, they could be in the game in 3 clicks. I was looking last night, talking about music in the metaverse. I was trying to get into Red Pill VR, which is one of your LA-based VR companies by Laurent Scalier. And, it was a 5 gig download. Then I had to create an account. Then I got to create an avatar. Then there's all this
Yeah.
apparatus and friction around how do I even get into the experience? And it only works on a PC,
Yeah.
and what you have with Croquet is you've got that, you're getting rid of all that friction so that I can just use a QR code or a link and click, and you and I can go on, or we can take a whole classroom of children on an amazing adventure together.
That's
So
right.
talk about like why is that so non-obvious to some of these other folks?
I think there's a misunderstanding of what the web is today. The web has proven to be, first of all, it's the most powerful platform on the planet. It's the most popular platform on the planet. Think about this. How much time do you spend on native applications versus in your browser? I mean, it's probably,
It's always open.
10,
Yeah.
10 to 90%, right? 90% of your time is browsing. You might switch over to Word, but even Word you can get online, or you might use Google Docs.
Mhm.
And so that's one. And of course, a lot of the reason is that it's friction free. I can get to these apps. The second thing that's really important is the browser is on every single device with a screen. You could probably have a browser on your watch. You might have one, I don't know. And so, immediately it's available, wherever you are. Your phone is an extraordinarily good web interface.
Oh yeah, didn't you do the browser for the BlackBerry at one point?
Yeah, we did. We did. That was called
Neomar, right?
Neomar. Neomar,
That's
yeah,
right. I remember Neomar. Yeah.
yeah. And so the next thing is, people really don't understand just how powerful, how fast the browser's gotten. WebGL is basically OpenGLES, which is almost the exact same graphics library that you use for high-end games. JavaScript is extraordinarily fast. It's just and amazingly flexible. And of course, now we have WebAssembly, which means we're able to run near native performance with languages like Rust and Go and that sort of thing in the browser. In fact, our physics engine is written in Rust and running in WebAssembly, and it's basically, it's easily the fastest physics engine in a browser today. So all of a sudden, once you understand all those parts are there, then it makes perfect sense to deploy on that platform, because today we can certainly say it's good enough, and I think it's much better than good enough. But tomorrow we're going to see huge gains, huge additional gains. We're going to see Web GPU, which in a lot of cases may give us a 10x improvement in graphics speed. And like I said, WebAssembly opens up a whole new world of capabilities. And most important, though, as you pointed out, it's connected by default. It's like when I go to, I can go to any web page, download it, and I'm immediately in. What's going to happen is those web pages are going to be micro worlds, parts of the metaverse. I mean, we built an operating system called Croquet Microverse. It's actually it's a layered system. The Croquet OS and then Microverse is like the windowing system on top, but it's actually not just a deployment system, it's a development system. You can actually collaborate and code within the system. This is going back to Doug's vision and Alan's vision of how things should work. So we're really, what we see is we're building a foundational piece of the metaverse. We believe in the web. It's clear that 90% is going to get bigger, not smaller. And so it's a natural fit. The other thing that's really amazing is, I invented portals 25 years ago, something like that. And when you have the web, you can actually have a live portal between two worlds, two different URLs completely. And not only can you do that, but you can do it safely and securely. So basically the way we do it is this close world, the one you're in is in an iframe, and the one you're looking at is in a different iframe. We cut a hole in this one, we can see into the other, and then when we walk through them, all we do is flip the order and we're now in that second world. And we can do that on and on. I call it meta surfing, right? that is something you're never going to be able to do with native applications. You can't hook one to the other, to the other, to the other like that. What are you going to do? When I go through this, I'm going to launch that other app, then I'm going to launch this other app. That's like stupid. The web browsers, I don't
Yeah, I
know
don't know
how
if you
many tabs
remember, we actually wrote about it back
That's right.
then. We talked
Yep.
about those ideas. So what do you think is going to be I've asked this of a few other folks, but what's going to be the first sort of $1 billion revenue application of the metaverse? Maybe I should go to a bigger number and say trillion these days, but I'm still looking for.
I think there's.
And let's take entertainment out, not pure entertainment, because games I think are already there.
No, I agree with that. I games are obvious and they're already past billion. So, you and I were talking about digital twins earlier. I think that the enterprise side of this equation is going to be astonishingly large. We were doing projects, 12, 15 years ago, where we were actually modeling, with real-time data, a offshore oil drilling platform. And so what we were able to do is create a virtual war room, where when one of these rigs had problems, everybody converged no matter where you are, and you're able to basically view what's the state of the system. We had everything from temperature of the pipes, the flow of the oil. These oil rigs, by the way, are they're science fiction devices. In fact, you can't even go on one unless you've had 2 weeks of training to be there.
I've been looking at that recently.
And so all of a sudden now we can project that information in that world anywhere at any time. And the oil business actually had a problem at that time. I think it's probably worse today, is that they have these people are very, very well trained about what to do with certain situations, but they're not on the rig. They're who knows where. They're worldwide, right? And so when you have these problems, you have to be able to bring in the expertise instantly to be able to address it. So you have this remote subject matter expert that's going to be engaged. Exactly. And so
I'm just sharing this thing this is a 688 attack sub, kind of like an oil rig, but it's got, it's an inherently dangerous, uncomfortable place to be. People need special training. They used to set aside a 688 attack sub in Groton, Connecticut, just for training, and everyone would have to travel there. But when we did this years ago, this is a digital twin of it that's driven by the nuclear propulsion system and the hydraulics and everything else. And you can do everything you can in the real submarine in this simulated version of it. But we had a big install. It was in the Unreal Engine. It was heavy. But we could support up to 32 users. But being able to do all of this in something that's lightweight, like a web browser, that can be easily updated in runtime, like you're describing, I think is going to have extraordinary implications for any of these kinds of regulated businesses like energy, water, transportation. We know from our time at Lockheed that it's certainly true for, defense and other industries. But it's very interesting.
There's no question that's going to be, I'd say, potentially bigger than games. Honestly, I think that the power of that, and remember, we're talking about applications everywhere from factory floor to in external installations. We're right now talking about refineries. We're talking about electrical substations and battery substations.
Man, with electric vehicles, almost all of our homes become these little micro energy stations, don't they?
That's right.
Or will they? Yeah.
Well, we see, for example, your ability to control your the temperature and climate in your house from a distance. I mean, we're seeing that we talk about the Internet of Things is already a reality, and it's already having an impact on how people engage and how people control their personal lives. But, you know, amplify that to a billion and you'll see what the enterprise side of this is going to be. Yeah, so digital twins are a absolutely enormous opportunity. And you know, one of the things we did to ensure that we're able to address that is you're able to send live data feeds into a shared world, kind of like what we did with the oil rigs in the past. And that's a big change. That's a game changer, being able to see that live data feed. And then it's a bi-directional thing. So you can actually modify parameters, whatever it is, the system you're engaging with. So yeah, it's there's no question that's going to be, I think that's going to be where the real excitement is over the next few years. And of course that feeds into everything too, because that sort of, you know, there's a pretty high bar to be able to provide that capability, but the technologies we develop there are going to feed right back into human to human interactions at every level, including, you know, education. Your kindergartners in 10 years are going to be using that same, you know, that same Tang technology from the moonshots to interact with each other.
Yeah, I think there's something very deep there. I mean, you know that I've held that. I have this conference I do called, and I call my little session the Simulation Century. You've spoken on it twice, but the idea is that the last century was about the recorded image, would reflect upon current and recent events by reviewing footage of it, right? And that rewired our brains. It had cultural implications for all of us. Now we've got this ability to collaborate around simulated worlds and try to create predictive models of futures. Like, what if we do build back better? What if we invest in this infrastructure or that infrastructure? What if everybody really is driving electric vehicles that when you get back home, you plug it into your house and it powers your home? How does that change everything? And we can actually do that in these simulated portaled croquet worlds, right?
Yeah, the we're going to quickly see. I think there's sort of a weird race that we're in, and people don't realize this. And it's a three-way race. The first is, you know, you look at your phone, and what you're really looking at is a consumer device. You can't create on a phone. You can do videos and things like that, but that's about the extent. And so what we see, and this is a really key element, is these wearable devices we talked about earlier are going to get good, and they're going to replace your phone. They're going to replace your PC. They're going to replace IMAX, because you're going to be able to create a screen that is that big and that high resolution wherever you happen to be standing. But that device, if it's a consumer device, we're in big trouble. So that's the first one. And the second one is we have a bigger vision of that's a creation device, a world that you and I are going to be talking about ideas. And as we do, we have an AI that is extending those ideas, reifying those ideas, so we can actually see what we're talking about. We can hear the, you know, kind of the motion of the system. It becomes as live and real as any physical thing around us. And that, you know, that's one of those things that completely unleashes human creativity and capability. But the third leg is the AIs themselves. AIs are this very, very double-edged sword. On the one hand, they are obviously watching us, and we get this really interesting feedback loop where if their job is to entertain us, they're going to do that, and they'll fail a little bit, but they learn from their mistakes and they get better and better and better. And so basically they create this addicting cycle for humans that, hey, we're going to entertain you to death, like Neil Postman said many years ago.
Well,
the other side of it, good.
I was going to say, one of the things you told me a while ago is even with 3D interfaced worlds, like successful interfaces should disappear, right? And ultimately, the ultimate user interface is AI. where I can just like Star Trek tried to expose us to. You walk into the holodeck, you say, "Computer, generate this world. Take me to this. Take me to the bottle of Agincourt. I want to become an archer," and it creates this scene for you, and then this thing starts happening.
That's right.
So first of all, how far are we away from that? And secondly, who's going to be the first person to create the breakthrough AR glasses for us?
Well, the first question is, I think we're within 5 years of that human computer human interface. I mean, that's what we're building. Our first phase of our effort is obviously building out the core kernel of the system so that we have that replicated state. So I see what you see, and you see me do something as I do it. The second phase of that is enabling computer AIs to participate in that conversation and help generate the idea space along with us. That's something that, where we're looking at how AI is evolving is getting good enough. I think you could almost get by with a lot of what we have today, but you have to probably do a little more descriptive discussion, and it's probably not going to be smart enough to have a dynamic interaction with you, but you can see it's on that's on the horizon. So 5 years, I think we'll have a pretty good approximation of this interface that we were just talking about. As far as who's going to build those glasses, the best stuff I've seen so far is in China. Actually, no, I'll tell you, actually, the best device I've seen by far was on the Mario Kart VR ride at Universal theme parks.
Interesting.
It is. I was blown away by the field of view and by the quality. It was, and in that case, it was all about the coating on the lens, but it was just
in a pretty controlled environment, right?
I saw it in an uncontrolled environment, and it was still pretty damn good. So
good.
Yeah, it's pretty magic. I'm not sure that's the end point. I think we can do much better than that, but I do think that when Alan had this phrase "good enough to criticize," I think that's what I saw there was the first AR device that was good enough to criticize.
Fascinating. All right, so this has been a great discussion. I know we're going to have more of these, but just for our viewers, today, we're in the middle of August, 2022. What can people expect to see out of Croquet between now and December that you can talk about?
Yeah, so we are in beta right now of the Croquet Microverse operating system. We should be delivering it. You can access it right now, by the way, and it's actually open source. Everything above the kernel is open source. You can access it right now. But it
croquet.io.
Go to croquet.io and we'll walk you through how to set it up on your machine to start playing with it. It's for developers. So you don't just go there and walk around. It's really for people who are going to build the next metaverse space, the next Facebook worlds and things. And it does a great job at that. And everything you do is multi-user. That's the nice thing, is the developers don't have to figure out how to do any of that. It's very multi-user programming is very complex, and we do that for you. So your focus is building what do you want the users to do, not how they will do it.
Got it. Well, that's great. Well, I look forward to seeing it. Us, the stuff we're working on at Ultisim, we're dependent upon your success because we're counting on this frictionless access for all of our users, and everybody else I know will benefit from that as well. But again, thank you for the first 31 years of our collaboration. I'm looking forward to the next 31.
Yep, good deal. Take care. Thank you.
Thanks, buddy.